even with Zeppelin. The thing is, we have never socialized. As soon as we left the road, we never saw each other.
For many years, fans have seen John Paul Jones as the quiet foundation of Led Zeppelin. He was the skilled bass player and keyboard player who helped hold together the band's powerful sound. But what many people don't know is that Jones almost didn't join the legendary group at all. In a surprising confession, Jones admitted that he nearly turned down the chance to be part of Led Zeppelin. From the chaos of life on the road to the stress behind the scenes, Jones has opened up about what it was really like to be in one of the greatest rock bands of all time. Led Zeppelin formed in 1968 through a combination of luck and necessity. The band's story begins with the Yardbirds, a British rock group that had been quite successful in the 1960s. By the summer of 1968, however, the Yardbirds had broken up, leaving guitarist Jimmy Page as the only member left. Page was already a well-known session musician with a reputation for being creative and innovative. He was determined to create a new band that would push rock music to new limits. He imagined a powerful sound that mixed blues with technical skill and raw energy. To make his dream come true, Page needed musicians who could match his own talent. His first choice was John Paul Jones, a highly skilled musician who could play multiple instruments and arrange music. Like Page, Jones had made a name for himself in the London music scene as a session musician. He had worked with famous artists like Donovan and the Rolling Stones. His deep understanding of music composition and arrangement made him perfect for bass guitar and keyboards. Finding the right singer proved to be more difficult. Page first tried to get Terry Reid, a rising star in British rock. However, Reid said no and instead recommended a young, relatively unknown singer from the Midlands named Robert Plant. At the time, Plant was the lead singer for a band called Bay and of Joy, a blues rock group that had earned a small but loyal group of fans. Page was immediately impressed by Plant's powerful voice and stage presence. Plant then suggested a drummer he had worked with before, named John Bonham. Bonham was known for his thunderous, hard-hitting drumming style and was in high demand in the local club scene. At first, he was hesitant to join because he already had other commitments, but he eventually agreed after Plant kept encouraging him and Page made him a good offer. Bonham's aggressive yet precise drumming style would later become one of the key elements that defined Led Zeppelin's sound. With all four members in place, the band first performed under the name The New Yardbirds to fulfill the remaining tour dates that the Yardbirds had already committed to. However, it quickly became clear that this was a completely different musical group. The name Led Zeppelin reportedly came from a joke made by Keith Moon and John Entwistle from The Who. They had once joked that a supergroup featuring Page would go down like a lead balloon. Page found the phrase funny but changed lead to lead to prevent people from pronouncing it wrong. In the fall of 1968, the band went into the studio to record their first album. Page paid for it himself, and the album was recorded in just 36 hours. It showcased a mix of blues, hard rock, and folk influences. When it was released in early 1969, Led Zeppelin received praise from critics and was commercially successful, introducing the world to the band's powerful sound. Later that same year, their second album, Led Zeppelin II, made them rock legends with hits like Whole Lotta Love. For any rock band, performing live is an essential and exciting part of their career. It allows them to connect with their audience in a way that no studio album ever could. The energy, passion, and raw power of a live performance define a band's legacy, and few groups showed this intensity more than Led Zeppelin. However, behind the electrifying concerts and sold-out arenas, the constant cycle of touring presented huge challenges. Led Zeppelin's rise to fame in the late 1960s and early 1970s brought them to the top of the rock world, but their success came at a cost. Their tours were legendary, not just for their explosive performances, but also for their sheer intensity. Unlike many other bands, Led Zeppelin rarely used traditional ways to promote themselves, such as releasing singles or appearing on television. Instead, they built their reputation on the strength of their live shows, playing night after night across continents, often covering huge distances with little time to rest. By the mid-1970s, the pressures of this lifestyle became increasingly difficult to handle, especially for drummer John Bonham. While all members of the band felt the weight of the demanding schedule, Bonham was hit the hardest. The constant travel, Irregular sleeping patterns and the physical effort required for high-energy performances took a severe toll on his health and well-being. Bonham was not just any drummer. His playing was fierce, his style aggressive yet precise, and his stamina legendary. Night after night, he pushed himself to the limit, delivering thunderous beats that became the backbone of Led Zeppelin's sound. But, behind the scenes, the strain of maintaining this level of intensity was beginning to show. More than anything, Bonham wanted to be with his family. While Led Zeppelin's amazing success had brought him fame and fortune, it had also kept him away from his wife Pat and their children for long periods. As the years went by, the emotional burden of being away from home for so long became overwhelming. On several occasions, Bonham expressed a deep desire to leave the band, citing the exhaustion of touring and his growing need to put his family life first. However, walking away from one of the biggest bands in the world was not easy. The band's manager, Peter Grant, understood how valuable Bonham was to Led Zeppelin and made every effort to keep him committed. Grant was known for his aggressive management style and unwavering dedication to the band's success. He frequently convinced Bonham to stay by offering financial incentives or expensive gifts. In one particularly well-known instance, Grant gave Bonham a Lamborghini to persuade him to continue touring. These gestures temporarily reassured Bonham, but they did little to address the deeper issues affecting his well-being. Led Zeppelin's status as one of the greatest rock bands in history is undisputed. Their influence on rock music is immeasurable, and their legacy continues to thrive decades after their prime. However, while their on-stage chemistry was electric and their musical harmony was unmatched, the relationships among the band members offstage were far from harmonious. Unlike many bands that started as childhood friends or close groups, Led Zeppelin's internal dynamics were shaped more by professional necessity than personal bonds. In a 2007 interview with Q magazine, bassist John Paul Jones openly reflected on the band's relationships, emphasizing that the members were not particularly close outside of their work together. "We get along fine," he stated when asked about his relationship with surviving bandmates Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. "The thing is, we have never socialized. As soon as we left the road, we never saw each other, which I always thought contributed to the longevity and harmony of the band. We weren't friends." His words provide a stark contrast to the public perception of bands as tightly knit units, showing that Led Zeppelin's strength lay in their musical partnership rather than deep personal friendship. IPS. Jones further explained this by comparing their dynamic to a professional working relationship rather than the typical brotherhood that many rock bands often project. "We weren't like a group that grew up together and made it big," he explained. Led Zeppelin wasn't manufactured exactly, but it was put together by Jimmy. His comment highlights how Jimmy Page, the band's guitarist and primary creative force, assembled the group with a specific vision rather than forming it naturally from pre-existing friendships. The internal divisions and tensions within the band became increasingly obvious during the mid to late 1970s, a period marked by both creative ambition and personal struggles. While the group had already established itself as one of the biggest rock bands in the world, cracks in their unity started to widen, particularly during the recording sessions for their albums Presence, 1976, and In Through the Outdoor, 1979. These tensions came from a combination of different personal lifestyles, the pressures of fame, and the physical and emotional toll of years on the road. A major point of disagreement was the stark contrast in work habits among the band members. Guitarist Jimmy Page and drummer John Bonham were notorious for their late-night habits, frequently engaging in late-night partying, which often included heavy drinking and drug use. Their unpredictable schedules and excessive lifestyle meant that their contributions to the band's recordings were often done during late-night or early morning hours. In contrast, vocalist Robert Plant and bassist/keyboardist John Paul Jones adopted a more disciplined approach to their work, preferring structured recording sessions during the daytime. This fundamental difference in working styles led to inefficiencies in the studio, making the recording process increasingly frustrating and disjointed. Jones later recalled how the band often felt like ships passing in the night. As Page and Bonham would record their parts in the later hours while he and Plant worked during the day. This lack of coordination resulted in disjointed sessions where members would sometimes feel as if they were working on separate projects rather than as a united band. The different levels of commitment to structured work also created resentment, particularly as Jones and Plant found themselves carrying more of the burden of keeping things organized. The recording of Presence was particularly difficult due to external pressures adding to the internal struggles. Plant had suffered serious injuries in a car accident in 1975, which left him unable to tour and confined to a wheelchair during much of the recording process. This led to frustration not just for Plant, but for the entire band as they were forced to adapt to new working conditions. Additionally, Page, who had taken on a central role in the album's production, was reportedly battling his own issues, particularly with substance abuse, making his leadership inconsistent. Bonham's excessive drinking and unpredictable behavior further made tensions worse, leading to moments where communication within the band broke down almost entirely. By the time they worked on In Through the Outdoor, the division within the band had become even more pronounced. Jones and Plant, frustrated with Page and Bonham's erratic habits, took a more active role in shaping the album. As a result, In Through the Outdoor had a sound that was somewhat different from previous Led Zeppelin records, incorporating more keyboard-driven compositions and a lighter, more experimental approach. This shift in creative direction was largely driven by Jones, who stepped in to fill the leadership gap left by Page's increasing detachment. Page and Bonham, meanwhile, were often absent from key recording sessions, further showing the growing divide between the two factions within the band. The result of these tensions was not just an impact on the music, but also on the relationships between the band members. While they had once operated as a tight-knit unit by the late 1970s, their interactions were marked by frustration and, at times, open hostility. Plant, who had already been struggling with personal tragedies, including the loss of his son in 1977, became increasingly disillusioned with the band's direction. Jones, though less vocal about his frustrations, found himself alienated by the deteriorating group dynamic. Meanwhile, Page and Bonham, while still passionate about the music, struggled with their personal problems, further distancing themselves from the others. The mounting strain within the band, coupled with external pressures and personal hardships, made it increasingly difficult for Led Zeppelin to function effectively. While they managed to complete In Through the Outdoor, it was clear that their creative and personal connections had been severely tested. These internal divisions, alongside Bonham's tragic death in 1980, ultimately led to the band's decision to break up, marking the end of an era for one of rock's most iconic groups. The challenges faced by Led Zeppelin were not unique in the world of rock music. The image of a rock band as a tight-knit family bound together by an unbreakable brotherhood is often more of a carefully created illusion than a reality. While bands project unity on stage and in promotional materials, behind the scenes, the dynamics are far more complex. Famous photographer Penny Smith, a close friend of Mick Jagger and Ronnie Wood, provided insight into this reality. She noted that the family bond often depicted in rock bands rarely extended beyond the professional sphere. According to her observations, even in a band as legendary as the Rolling Stones, members such as Keith Richards and Charlie Watts seldom spent time together outside of work. This revelation highlights a fundamental truth about rock bands. The intense pressures of fame, constant touring, and the need for personal space often drive musicians apart, rather than bring them closer. When artists are thrust into an environment where they must work together daily, tensions inevitably arise. Differences in personality, creative direction, and personal priorities can create divisions that make off-stage friendship difficult to maintain. In many cases, the necessity of maintaining a working relationship outweighs any personal closeness that might have once existed. Touring, in particular, plays a significant role in shaping these dynamics. The grueling schedules, long stretches away from home, and the emotional exhaustion of performing night after night take a toll. While audiences see a band performing in perfect harmony, they rarely witness the stress that accompanies life on the road. Members often retreat into their own spaces, seeking comfort in hotel rooms, private parties, or separate travel arrangements. This need for distance is not necessarily a sign of hostility, but rather a crucial coping mechanism for survival in an industry that demands constant engagement. Following Led Zeppelin's breakup in 1980, after the tragic death of drummer John Bonham, each of the surviving members embarked on their own musical journeys. Among them, Robert Plant was the first to establish a significant new project with the Honeydrippers, a band he initially formed in 1981. This group marked a stylistic departure from the hard rock and heavy blues of Led Zeppelin. Instead, it embraced a mix of early rock and roll, R&B, and jump blues. The Honeydrippers featured an impressive lineup of musicians, including Plant's former Zeppelin bandmate Jimmy Page on lead guitar, as well as contributions from other notable artists such as Jeff Beck, legendary session musician and Late Night with David Letterman bandleader Paul Shaffer, and Nile Rodgers, the iconic guitarist and producer from Chic. Despite this star-studded ensemble, the group remained more of a side project rather than a full-time band, releasing only one album, The Honeydrippers Volume 1, in 1984. The album showcased Plant's love for the music that had influenced him in his youth, leaning heavily into vintage R&B and standards from the 1950s and early 1960s. The most successful track from the album was a cover of Phil Phillips' Sea of Love, which became a major hit, reaching number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in early 1985. The success of Sea of Love demonstrated Plant's ability to thrive outside Zeppelin's signature hard rock sound, appealing to a broader audience and proving his versatility as a vocalist. Meanwhile, Led Zeppelin's legacy continued to resonate with fans. In November 1982, the band's label, Swan Song Records, released Coda, a posthumous compilation album consisting of outtakes and unused tracks from various recording sessions throughout Zeppelin's career. It served as a final offering to fans and helped fulfill contractual obligations with Atlantic Records. The album included 2 live recordings from Led Zeppelin's legendary 1970 performance at the Royal Albert Hall, as well as tracks from the Led Zeppelin III and Houses of the Holy sessions. Additionally, 3 songs originated from the In Through the Outdoor sessions, which were among the last recordings the band made before Bonham's passing. One of the most intriguing tracks was Bonzo's Montreux, a drum solo recorded by Bonham in 1976 and later enhanced with electronic effects by Page, further emphasizing the late drummer's innovative approach to percussion. Despite Led Zeppelin's formal disbandment, there were occasional reunions. The first took place on July 13, 1985, at the Live Aid charity concert at JFK Stadium in Philadelphia. Page, Plant, and John Paul Jones came together for a brief but highly anticipated set, joined by 2 drummers, Tony Thompson and Phil Collins, as well as bassist Paul Martinez, who had played with Plant's solo band. However, the performance was fraught with problems. The lack of adequate rehearsal time resulted in an uncoordinated effort, particularly with the dual drummers, while Page struggled with an out-of-tune guitar and malfunctioning stage monitors. Meanwhile, Plant's voice was strained, possibly due to the intense demands of the day. The chaotic performance left the band members dissatisfied, with Page later calling it pretty shambolic, and Plant referring to it as an atrocity. 3 years later, the trio attempted another reunion, this time for the Atlantic Records' 40th anniversary concert on May 14, 1988. For this performance, they enlisted Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, to play drums in a heartfelt tribute to his late father. However, tensions ran high between Plant and Page, who reportedly argued backstage just before taking the stage over whether to include Stairway to Heaven in the set list. The live broadcast also suffered technical difficulties, with Jones's keyboard parts missing from the television feed, diminishing the overall impact of the performance. In retrospect, both Page and Plant expressed disappointment in the outcome, with Page calling it one big disappointment, and Plant simply stating, "The gig was foul." By the early 1990s, Led Zeppelin's legacy had only grown stronger. Their influence on rock music remained undeniable, and interest in their catalog was as high as ever. Recognizing this, Jimmy Page took on the task of remastering the band's music to introduce it to a new generation of listeners. In 1990, the first Led Zeppelin box set was released, featuring a carefully curated selection of tracks, all remastered under Page's supervision.